Welcome. You've pressed play to drift, perhaps to learn, perhaps to rest. And tonight, we are wandering far back into the Middle Ages, behind the walls of a medieval castle. When we hear the word castle, the imagination often leaps to shining knights, grand banquets, and tall towers under the moonlight. But the reality, as you will see, was quite different.
Ice.
Life inside a castle was not glamorous. It was drafty, smoky, crowded, and full of chores that never ended. So settle yourself wherever you are. Let your breathing slow, and let the weight of the present fall away. Imagine the heaviness of thick stone walls around you, the sound of the wind pushing at wooden shutters, and the faint echo of voices far away. Imagine waking up not in a soft, warm bed, but in a chamber of stone. The air is cool, even in summer, and in winter it is bitingly cold. The only warmth comes from a small fire, if you are fortunate enough to have one, or from the layers of rough wool blankets pulled tightly around you. The stone walls hold the chill of the night. They hold the damp, too. When you draw a breath, it carries with it the faint scent of earth and ash. The castle is alive with smells the temps of smoke from the hearth, the must of straw mattresses, the aroma of yesterday's meals lingering in the hall. You rise early. Life in a castle runs on discipline and routine, and no hour can be wasted. Servants are already moving quietly, carrying buckets of water drawn from a well or cistern. Firewood must be carried in, kindling must be laid. Without it, the fireplaces will go dark, and with them the little comfort they provide. For most people in the castle, there is work from dawn until dark. If you are a servant or laborer, the day is filled with unending tasks. Hauling, sweeping, cooking, repairing. The castle is not the polished fortress of fairy tales. It is always in need of upkeep. Stones shift, timbers crack, roofs leak, and all of it requires human hands. The great hall, the heart of the castle, might be stirring to life. Imagine walking across its uneven floor, the straw scattered underfoot to soak up spills and dirt. The air is thick with the smell of smoke, because chimneys are primitive and often draw poorly. The fire burns, but the room is still dim. Windows are narrow slits, more for defense than light, and heavy shutters keep out the chill. Meals are not glamorous affairs. In the morning, bread that is coarse and dark, perhaps a little ale, and if you are lucky, some cheese. Later, stews made from whatever is available: beans, cabbage, onions, salted meats. Salt and smoke preserve food, but they change its taste, and the flavors are heavy, earthy, never fresh. Imagine yourself lifting a wooden spoon to your lips, tasting broth that is nourishing but plain. The bread is thick and chewy, perhaps slightly stale. Your teeth work harder than they are used to, and your stomach fills slowly, but never quite completely. Hygiene, too, is far from our expectations. Bathing is rare. Water is carried by hand and heated slowly over fire, so baths are infrequent luxuries. Instead, you might wash your hands and face in a small basin, and change your linen when it becomes unbearable. The castle air is filled with human smells, with smoke, with the scent of animals in the stables and kitchens. It is not repulsive to its inhabitants, merely normal, part of the rhythm of their lives. And then there is the cold. Even in the finest chambers, even with fires, the drafts are constant. The windows rattle in their frames. The flagstones under your feet are hard and unyielding. The cold creeps in through walls and floors, never fully leaving. You might sleep wearing several layers of clothing, a cap on your head, and still wake shivering. If you imagine yourself as part of the garrison, the rhythm is different, but no less tiring. Guard duty is long and monotonous. You stand on the battlements, eyes straining into the mist, ears listening for movement. The wind stings your face, the rain seeps into your cloak. Hours pass in silence, broken only by the cawing of crows or the distant bark of a dog. The body aches from standing still, but the mind grows restless from the waiting. Inside, life is noisy in its own way. Hammers strike at anvils in the smithy, children chatter and cry, animals grunt in the stables. A castle is not quiet, is filled with echoes, footsteps, voices bouncing off the walls, but the noise is constant, repetitive. Over time, it becomes like a hum in the background of life. At night, the castle settles. Fires die down. The air grows even colder. Torches and candles are extinguished one by one. shadows stretch along the walls. Imagine lying on your straw mattress, the sound of rats scurrying somewhere nearby, the distant creak of timbers in the wind. Sleep comes slowly, not always easily, but it is the only escape from the labor of the day. To live in a medieval castle was to live in a rhythm of endurance. Cold mornings, smoky halls, coarse food, endless chores. It was a place of work and duty, less a palace than a fortress, designed not for comfort but for survival. And this is why, if you found yourself in that time, in those walls, you might not last a day. This is where we begin. As we move onward in our journey through the medieval castle, let us leave behind the daily rhythm of chores and meals and step into a moment of history. A moment when one such castle became the center of a desperate struggle. Rochester Castle, in Kent, still stands today in its weathered, ruined form. Tall and rectangular, its keep rises high above the River Medway. Even in ruins, it gives a sense of strength. In the 12th century, it was a formidable fortress, with walls thick enough to withstand bombardment and towers meant to intimidate anyone who dared to challenge them. The year was 1215, a year marked by turmoil in England. King John, often remembered as a troubled, even despised monarch, was at war with many of his own barons. Earlier that year at Runnymede, he had been forced to sign the Magna Carta, a charter of liberties that attempted to place limits on royal power. But John soon rejected it, and civil war followed. In that war, Rochester Castle became a focal point. It was held by rebel barons who opposed the king, and King John could not allow such a powerful stronghold, so close to London, to remain in enemy hands. The siege began in October of that year. Imagine yourself among the defenders. The castle gates are barred, the drawbridge raised, and provisions gathered. You know the king's army is coming, and that once the walls are surrounded, there will be no escape. For the men inside, life became one of waiting. Waiting and watching. The enemy camp outside grew larger, fires flickering in the fields, drums and horns sometimes sounded. The sight of soldiers moving in ranks became familiar. The river shimmered in the distance, but no help was coming. King John's forces began their assault. They built siege engines, wooden towers, catapults, and battering rams. Stones were hurled against the walls, arrows flew, but the keep was strong, and the defenders held on. The days passed, one into another. Food supplies began to dwindle. Bread grew harder, meat saltier, and portions smaller. Imagine chewing slowly, trying to make a meager portion last. The water in the cistern was precious, guarded carefully. Fires still burned, but smoke filled the chambers as more people gathered close together for warmth. The attackers changed their strategy. Beneath the castle walls, they began to dig. Tunnels, called mines, were carved through the earth, supported by timber. The goal was to weaken the foundations. And when enough of the tunnel was complete, the timbers would be set alight. The attackers changed their strategy. Beneath the castle walls, they began to dig. Tunnels, called mines, were carved through the earth, supported by timber. The goal was to weaken the foundations. And when enough of the tunnel was complete, the timbers would be set alight. At Rochester, this tactic was devastating. Historical records suggest that pig fat, vast amounts of it, was used to fuel the fire in the tunnels, creating intense heat. The timbers collapsed, and with them, part of the castle wall. Imagine hearing the deep, groaning sound of stone giving way. Dust filling the air, shouts echoing through the keep. A breach had opened. The defenders, weakened by hunger and exhaustion, retreated further inside, holding the inner chambers as long as they could. The siege dragged on for weeks. November gave way to December. Cold crept into the stone. Supplies dwindled to nothing. Accounts say that the defenders, starving, may have been reduced to eating horseflesh, perhaps even worse when nothing else remained. You can picture the gnawing hunger, the stomach twisting in emptiness, and the quiet endurance of men who knew they could not hold out much longer. The siege dragged on for weeks. November gave way to December. Cold crept into the stone. Supplies dwindled to nothing. Accounts say that the defenders, starving, may have been reduced to eating horseflesh, perhaps even worse when nothing else remained. You can picture the gnawing hunger, the stomach twisting in emptiness, and the quiet endurance of men who knew they could not hold out much longer. Finally, after nearly 2 months, the defenders surrendered. Some were executed, but others were imprisoned. The castle itself, battered but not destroyed, remained a symbol of strength. And King John, though he won the siege, did not win the larger struggle. His rule continued to falter, and within a year he was dead, leaving the crown to his young son, Henry. The siege of Rochester Castle was not the largest or the bloodiest in medieval history, but it illustrates the grim endurance of life in a fortress under attack. Imagine the ceaseless waiting, the dwindling rations, the constant chill, days blending together, the nights broken by watch shifts, and the distant sounds of siege engines at work. The siege of Rochester Castle was not the largest or the bloodiest in medieval history, but it illustrates the grim endurance of life in a fortress under attack. Imagine the ceaseless waiting, the dwindling rations, the constant chill, days blending together, the nights broken by watch shifts, and the distant sounds of siege engines at work. It was a test of patience, of resilience, and of the quiet strength to endure when escape was impossible. And so we leave the defenders of Rochester behind, their voices long gone, their struggle preserved only in stones and chronicles. The castle still stands, silent and watchful, a reminder of that long winter of siege. Now, having glimpsed a castle at war, let us turn to something different. Beyond battles and hunger, castles hold secrets. Passageways hidden in walls, chambers forgotten underground, dungeons whose uses are still debated. In our next part, we will walk softly into these mysteries and see what secrets the castles of Europe still keep. Castles were not only fortresses of stone and mortars, they were also puzzles, built over generations, altered by different rulers, and layered with defense and secrecy. Within their walls were passageways, chambers, and corridors that many never saw. Some were practical, others were mysterious. Some are still being uncovered today. Now, having glimpsed a castle at war, let us turn to something different. Beyond battles and hunger, castles hold secrets. Passageways hidden in walls, chambers forgotten underground, dungeons whose uses are still debated. In our next part, we will walk softly into these mysteries and see what secrets the castles of Europe still keep. Castles were not only fortresses of stone and mortars, they were also puzzles, built over generations, altered by different rulers, and layered with defense and secrecy. Within their walls were passageways, chambers, and corridors that many never saw. Some were practical, others were mysterious. Some are still being uncovered today. Now, having glimpsed a castle at war, let us turn to something different. Beyond battles and hunger, castles hold secrets. Passageways hidden in walls, chambers forgotten underground, dungeons whose uses are still debated. In our next part, we will walk softly into these mysteries and see what secrets the castles of Europe still keep. Castles were not only fortresses of stone and mortars, they were also puzzles, built over generations, altered by different rulers, and layered with defense and secrecy. Within their walls were passageways, chambers, and corridors that many never saw. Some were practical, others were mysterious. Some are still being uncovered today. Imagine yourself walking along a dim corridor. The walls are of rough stone, cool to the touch. The air is still, carrying the faint scent of dust. Somewhere ahead, the passage narrows and bends. You are underground, beneath the bustle of the great hall, beneath the footsteps of guards on the ramparts. Few people would have known this path, and fewer still would have been permitted to use it. Many castles contain postern gates, small, hidden doors built into the outer walls. These were escape routes, allowing defenders to slip out under siege, perhaps to fetch supplies or to summon reinforcements. To an enemy, they were invisible from the outside, disguised within the stone. To those within, they were lifelines, carefully guarded secrets. There were also spiral staircases that twisted tightly within towers. These were designed not only to connect levels, but to favor defenders. A man ascending, sword in hand, would find his right arm restricted by the central column. A man descending would have freer movement. The very shape of the steps themselves concealed a quiet logic of battle. Some castles, especially in France and Germany, contained entire networks of underground tunnels. These connected keeps to outer walls, or linked towers across courtyards. In times of peace, they might have been storage spaces, cool and dark, where barrels of grain or casks of ale could be kept. In times of danger, they became places of refuge, where the garrison could retreat or prisoners could be held away from sight. The word dungeon itself conjures images of iron chains and torture devices, and indeed, some castles held grim chambers for captives. But many so-called dungeons were simpler, cellars converted into prisons or small vaulted rooms with heavy doors. The darkness alone was enough to oppress the spirit. Imagine the silence, the air thick and stale, the sense of time slipping slowly by with no way to mark the hours. In certain castles, hidden rooms have been discovered centuries after they were built. At Warwick Castle in England, a secret passage leads from the castle down to the river. At Dover Castle, tunnels stretch beneath the cliffs, expanded and repurposed even in later centuries. In Prague, legends speak of chambers, sealed and never opened, said to contain treasures or curses, or simply the forgotten debris of ages. Think of how these spaces must have felt to those who knew them. Servant carrying a torch through a narrow passage, flame flickering against the stone. Soldier crouching silently in the dark, waiting for the order to emerge. Or perhaps a prisoner, left in solitude, tracing patterns on the wall with tired fingers. These passages and chambers were practical, but they also carried with them an aura of secrecy. To step inside them now, centuries later, is to step outside of ordinary time. The noise of the world above fades. The light grows faint. The walls themselves seem to remember. Not all secrets were grim. Some castles held hidden chapels, small sanctuaries tucked into corners of the keep, where a few candles might flicker before a carved altar. The walls close, the prayers whispered. In such spaces, faith was kept alive quietly, in stillness, away from the spectacle of great churches. And there were also secret treasures of disornate ceilings hidden in upper chambers. Delicate carvings tucked into stairwells, symbols carved by masons whose names are long forgotten. Even now, historians find themselves puzzled by markings and inscriptions in castle walls, their meaning uncertain. Were they signs of ownership, blessings for protection, or something more mysterious? Imagine now, if you will, walking slowly back from such a hidden place, emerging from a tunnel into a sunlit courtyard. The sound of life returns, voices, footsteps, the clatter of pots from the kitchens. The secrets are tucked away once again, beneath the surface, holding their stories quietly in the dark. These secret places remind us that a castle was never just the towering walls we see from a distance. It was a world within a world. Some parts on display, bustling and loud, other parts hidden, silent, known only to a few. And as we leave the hidden chambers behind, let us turn to the visible, the open life of the castle's ruling elite. Beyond the smoky halls of servants and the shadows of tunnels, there was another world, one of ceremony, of luxury, and of rigid etiquette. A world where daily life was dictated not by the chores of survival, but by the expectations of status and power. In our next and final part, we will step gently into that world, into the chambers where nobles dined, conversed, and ruled. A place where the comforts of life were reserved for the very few. Up until now, we have walked with servants in smoky halls, soldiers on cold battlements, and with prisoners in hidden dungeons. But life inside a castle was not the same for everyone. There was another rhythm, another world, lived by the lords and ladies who ruled from within those stone walls. Imagine now that you are not a servant, not a soldier, but a guest at court. Your clothes are fine, made of dyed wool or linen, perhaps trimmed with fur. Fabric feels heavy yet warm against your skin. Belt clasps at your waist, and soft leather shoes press against the flagstone floor. You are led through the great hall, past tapestries that cover the stone, past carved wooden chairs, reserved for the most important guests. The great hall is not just a dining place. It is the center of ceremony. Here, the lord of the castle sits in state. His chair is raised upon a dais so that he can be seen by all. When he speaks, others listen. When he gestures, others respond. Etiquette governs every action. To bow or to curtsy, to wait until you are spoken to eat only when the Lord has begun. The rules may seem endless, but they provide order. They show who belongs where, who holds power, and who must remain silent. Meals at court are more elaborate than those served to the garrison or the servants. Imagine long trestle tables covered in linen cloth, ladders of roasted meats, dishes of fish, bowls of stewed fruits and vegetables. Bread, as always, is central, but here it is white and soft, made from finer flour. Spices from faraway cinnamon, cloves, pepper add, unexpected flavors, reserved for those who can afford them. Ale flows, and sometimes wine. Candles burn brightly, though their smoke curls upward into the beams. The sound of conversation hums across the hall, punctuated by the notes of a harp or the recitation of a poem. Entertainment is part of the feast. Music, stories, sometimes a jester performing antics to amuse the noble company. But even in this setting of abundance, daily life at court is not carefree. It is bound by ritual. The Lord must hold audience with his retainers, hearing disputes, granting favors, or passing judgment. Petitions are made, disputes settled, alliances forged. Every gesture is observed, every word weighed. For the ladies of the court, life is equally structured. Embroidery, reading, or supervising the work of servants fills the hours. Conversation is carefully measured. A lady might walk in the gardens of the inner ward, or spend time in prayer within the chapel. But she is always expected to embody dignity, modesty, and grace. Beyond meals and duties, the court also enjoys pastimes. Hunting is a favored pursuit. Imagine a noble party leaving the castle grounds on horseback, falcons resting on gloved hands, hounds eager for the chase. The air is fresh, the fields wide, and the hunt itself is as much a display of skill as it is a practical way to gather meat. Games are also popular. Chess, imported from the East, is played upon carved boards, the pieces heavy in hand. Dice games bring laughter, though they also bring risk, as fortunes are won and lost in the roll of a cube. Music and dancing provide lighter diversions, though always with formality. A dance is not only movement, but a display of poise and refinement. The chambers of the elite reflect their status. Unlike the cold, bare rooms of servants, noble chambers are furnished with canopied beds. Hangings of cloth to keep out drafts, and brightly colored cushions. The scent of herbs may be strewn upon the floor, both to freshen the air and to ward away pests. These touches do not erase the discomfort of stone, but they soften it. Faith, too, plays a constant role. The chapel within the castle is a place of regular worship, and religious observance shapes daily life. Bells mark the hours. Prayers are said before meals. Festivals and saints' days bring moments of ceremony that tie the life of the court to the rhythms of the church. To live at court is to live under constant observation. Every glance, every word, every gesture is part of the intricate fabric of status and reputation. Comfort exists. Yes, better food, warmer chambers, finer clothing. But it comes at the price of freedom. The nobleman or noblewoman is always on display, always bound by the expectations of their station. And so, whether in the smoky kitchens or the gilded chambers, life in the castle was shaped by discipline, by rules, by routines, by the weight of stone pressing inward. Few could escape it fully. Few were truly free. As you picture the hall falling quiet, the candles burning lower, the music fading into silence, you may notice how the contrasts of the castle all come together. Cold stone, yet warm hearth. Harsh labor, yet refined ceremony. Hidden tunnels, yet public displays of power. The castle contained all of these worlds at once, stacked together like layers of history, echoing with voices long gone. And now, as we close this exploration, let us step back from its walls. Let us listen to the silence beyond the gates, and let us bring our journey to a gentle end. And so, our time within the walls of the medieval castle comes to an end. We have walked through its cold, drafty chambers, where daily life was a rhythm of endurance. We have stood with the defenders of Rochester Castle, surrounded by hunger and stone. We have explored the hidden tunnels and secret rooms, where silence clings to every wall. And we have stepped into the great halls of the elite, where ceremony, luxury, and rules defined each moment. The castle was never a single thing. It was not only fortress, not only home, not only symbol. It was all of these at once. A place of power, yet also of hardship. A place of safety, yet also of confinement. When you imagine yourself there, you might feel the chill of the stone beneath your hand, hear the muffled hum of voices echoing across the hall, or see the flicker of a single torch against the walls. These small details linger, and they remind us that life in the past was not distant myth, but daily existence for countless people. Yet as you listen now, in your own quiet space, there is comfort in knowing that the cold, damp chambers and the rigid rules of the castle belong only to history. You rest not on straw, but on your own bed. You do not wake to the clatter of buckets or the call of watchmen, but to the softness of the present moment. The castle fades, its walls dissolving into mist. The voices grow silent, leaving only the gentle rhythm of your breath, and as you drift, you might imagine the slow toll of a bell far away. A sound that marks not duty or hardship, but the peaceful passing of time. The journey is complete, the story is told, and now there is nothing more to do but rest. Good night.